So this happened in the last house that I lived in. When I first moved in, I could immediately sense something off with my room. My room and the hallway leading to it would give me an immense feeling of dread and fear every time I walked through it. I would frequently have nightmares, and the scene would often be in my house. I would also frequently wake up in the middle of the night and see shadows in my room, sometimes 3-5 shadows at once. The shadows would be scattered around my room, but there would always be one standing right beside my bed, leaning over me. My closet was where the energy was the worst. Most mornings I would wake up to my closet being open when it was closed the day before. I also remember one time I was getting a jacket from my closet, and the moment I opened the door, I passed out. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. My body was in a position that would be impossible for me to have landed in. My arm was raised above my head and both legs were curled sideways.
I was chilling in our lounge. It was up a few steps, so when you looked out the lower windows over the dining room, it was at your exact height. I saw a small girl in a white dress with long blonde hair and a big smile run through the garden and down past the windows. It was a dead-end garden, all big fences, a massive gate, and overgrown weeds. I ran outside to go find her, thinking she had run away from her ma off the road. Was about 5 seconds behind her, and when I got to the garden where she should have been stopped, she was gone. About a year later, I had a failed pregnancy, and I buried the baby in that garden, just past that gate. Not a ghost maybe, but I think it was a premonition or an echo of possibility.
I worked demolition, interior mostly, so we would take walls and flooring up mostly for offices who wanted a remodel. Back in 2012, we were at the IDS Tower in MN, and we had to work overnights, so other floors wouldn't be disrupted by our noise. And I was in the penthouse, where we would store our tools, so one night, I am loading up my tool belt and heading down to the top floor, and the elevator randomly broke when I was inside. Of course I am by myself, so I called my supervisor, and he called the building to handle it and get me out. It was over an hour and the lights kept flickering, and I was bored and thankfully had my cell phone, and I was calling friends to pass time, and no one would answer. Third shift problems, LOL. But the next morning my friend asked why I left a whisper voice. Mail. Well, for one thing, I didn't leave no voicemail. When someone doesn't answer, I just hung up. But he had a 10-second voicemail from me, all whispers and one faint voice, and it is the creepiest stuff. We can't make out any words besides maybe out, and after being stuck, I felt weird the rest of the time in that building, like someone was behind a corner watching me. I hated being alone in that building.
I had this entity attached to me and followed me wherever I moved. Now I do not know if it was because of this green porcelain doll I found as a little girl that I kept until I had enough, or it showed up because I was alone a lot in my garage, used to sing with something. I would have a lot of sleep paralysis dreams. And once I hit 15 and started my cycle, those dreams became me astral projecting. And that started one night when I looked at the edge of my bed during a sleep paralysis. And I saw this closing red eyes. I turned away from it and it scratched me. I woke up with 3 little scratches, and every so often, even as I typed this, that spot would feel like someone pushing on it. Now from 1521, when I lost my virginity, I would constantly undergo these attacks. My body would get hot starting from my feet and then up to my neck. I would be able to move, and well, let's just keep it PG and say I believe it was an incubus attached to me. There would be times on Skype with friends. Skype would go crazy. My boyfriend at the time would hear a name voice right before my body would go hot. There were times I would say no to this thing, and my body would feel like pins and needles, and I would also scream. My laptop would also shut off, scaring my friends. It got so crazy my boyfriend at the time actually started using magic, the druid he was, and he would start getting attacked. Again, this happened up until 21. I was no longer with Skype boyfriend. We just lost each other's information and couldn't find one another.
Now!
I thought I was good, thinking it didn't want someone who wasn't a virgin anymore. I had a good 3 years of nothing, but it came back for a bit around the time my ex who I lived with were going through a hard time. We broke up. I met another druid guy during an online wedding. This druid knew I had some weird attachment somehow, and we dived into it. I was, 23? He out me in a trance, and I found myself in this cavern. And I saw this shadow being chased and called after it. Asked for its name, and then suddenly I was on a table chained and felt on fire. But then I saw a black wolf and was pulled out of the trance. Druid 2, then a ritual, and the thing was gone again. Until about 3 years ago. It came back about only for a very short time. I have a kid now. It showed up in a dream. My apartment was the beautiful green. It actually came to say goodbye in that dream. There was another time before this, but I don't fully remember it. I'm 31 now. I haven't seen this thing since that green room. Yep, this is 1000% true. I do like horror movies, but also do not because it would give this thing ideas and my mother has seen it walk around. She would want me to watch scary movies because it would really paranoia me. But only after I watched something scary would things move around or she would see things.
This was maybe 15 or so years ago when it happened. I was about 16 years old. I was hanging out with my ex's family and they all wanted to watch a horror movie. I was never really that big on horror, especially not the ones full of jump scares and stuff like that. We ended up settling on The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and after the movie was over, I wasn't really all that scared or creeped out and kinda just went home like normal. I'm not sure if something got in my head or what. But over the next few days, a lot of really weird stuff kept happening. I would wake up in the middle of the night, for like 3-4 nights in a row, and when I checked my clock next to the bed, it would be exactly 3:00 a.m. I had a generally sense of feeling uneasy before going to bed, and I was having bizarre dreams. I don't often dream or remember my dreams the next day, that I could recall clear as day. Really weird Salvador Dali type melting clock stuff. After a few days of this, I experienced of one the single scariest moments of my life. I had a dream in which I was talking to an indistinguishable shadowy figure. I can't entirely recall what we were talking about, but I felt very intimidated and powerless. It wanted something. The next part is hard to convey just how scary it was. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was sat straight up, and I was halfway through speaking a sentence. Like I was having a conversation, and the voice that was coming out of me was not mine. It was way deeper than I can make my voice, and Ivy never talked in my sleep. My mom, who is the lightest sleeper on the face of the earth, and who I've woken up by listening to music at a low volume through headphones at night, said she heard nothing. I haven't had another experience like that since then, but it will always stick with me. And to this day, I'm none the wiser about what it all meant.
When I was working security in a cemetery in Oakland, we were required to be in the cemetery multiple times a night for at least 45 minutes at a time. On top of this, we were required to exit our vehicles and walk a specific plot every night because of potential vandalism. One night I was walking on the gravel pathway after walking down the steps away from the roadway and I stopped walking. The footsteps behind me did not stop walking. I was alone. I did not see anything around me and the cemetery was closed and locked for the night. I never got out of my car in that spot again. We also had to lock up and open up the crematorium columbarium in the evenings and early mornings. I had heard talking and walking in the evenings and mornings when I had already been through the building. I hated that job. So many different stories from that place and the surrounding areas. I've actually had a lot of experiences throughout my life.